student loans. A CFPB official was cited by Bloomberg News saying that excessive student debt could slow the American economy's recovery. The housing market, particularly when young people are repaying money for their education, can't afford to buy a home. Massive student debt is also affecting consumers' ability to purchase goods and services. Yesterday, the Subcommittee on Financial Services and General Government held a hearing focusing on student debt. Treasury Secretary Geithner came in talking about it. Secretary Geithner recognized that private student loans do not come with any of the consumer protections that federal loans do. In 2005, Congress changed the bankruptcy laws. I want to make a point here, I voted against it. Congress changed the bankruptcy law and included a provision making private student loan debts non-dischargeable in bankruptcy except under the rarest of circumstances. I've never found one that has really qualified. That means that students are stuck with their loans for life. While the volume of private student loans is down from its peak just a few years ago, when it amounted to 26% of all student loans, private lending is still aggressively promoted by the for-profit college industry. The Project on Student Debt reports that 42% of for-profit college students had private loans in 2008. That's up from 12% just 5 years earlier, 12% to 42%. For-profit college students also graduate with more debt than their peers who graduate from public or private nonprofit colleges. Many for-profit colleges employ a business model that steers students into private student loans because of the 90-10 rule. For the record, private for-profit schools can only receive 90% of their revenue from the federal government. They're the closest darn thing to a federal agency you've ever seen, except they're making millions of dollars at the expense of the government and unsuspecting students and their families. So to find the 10% of non-federal money, private student loans. Get the students to sign up for 10% of their education in private student loans, even if they qualify for federal loans, which are a much better deal. The 90-10 rule that requires at least 10% of their revenue from non-federal student aid sources makes this an imperative for many for-profit schools. As a result, many students are encouraged to take out private loans when they're still eligible for federal loans, and even when the lenders know the students are going to default. Schools can comply with the 90-10 rule. How can you blame a student or his family if they're going to a school where we, the federal government, are willing to offer Pell Grants and federal loans? What's a student to think? Well, if it's good enough for the federal government to loan money, it must be a good school. In fact, in many instances, in most instances, these for-profit schools are not good schools. They are not offering a good education. There are exceptions, but too many of them are just bad operations. We subsidize it. 90 to 95% of their revenue comes straight from the federal government. When they talk about freezing federal employees' salaries, we ought to freeze the employees at these for-profit schools. They're the closest thing to federal employees we have. 95% federal. You don't hear that from the other side of the aisle, but it's fact. And I want to also tell you this. This student loan debt bomb that we're facing, which I talked to Treasury Secretary Geithner about tomorrow, is going to explode on us just like the subprime mortgage market. Let me tell you how it's going to work. More and more students are going into default. They can't pay back these student loans. And they are going to face life decisions that will change their futures and the future of the American economy. We now have 40% of students who are making payments on their student loans. 40%. 60% are not. Some are still in school, I'll concede that point, but many of them just can't do it. We pile this debt on, we give them preferred treatment in the bankruptcy court so that the lenders can't have the debt discharged, and we sit there and watch as the lives of these young people deteriorate. This one young lady who testified at my hearing borrowed $80,000, $40,000 from the federal government, $40,000 private student loan, went to the Harrington School of Design in the suburbs of Chicago, and ended up with a worthless diploma. Worthless. It's 5 years later now. Her debt is no longer $80,000. It's $98,000. It just keeps going up. She pays $830 a month, and the private student loan debt is exploding right in front of her. She can't pay it. She doesn't know what she's going to do. She said, I'm going to have to give up the little home my husband and I just bought, and it looks pretty desperate for her. Her desperate situation affects her at the age of 32. 32. How do we let this happen? Don't we have an obligation as a government, as a people, to stop this exploitation of children and their families? That's what's going on.